books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. One of her advocacy, the leadership fanatic who turns tough conversations into a breakthrough moment. None other than Miss Mylena Sutton.
Indeed. Hi, how are you? Good to be here.
Yes, fabulous, fabulous. Miss Melina, and can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Sure. My name is Mylena Sutton, and I run two businesses, but I have the same approach and philosophy with respect to the work that I do. I help people confront themselves, whether it's on the clock or off the clock, so that they can align what they say matters to them with the choices that they make and how they live. And in the meantime, identify the contradictions that are keeping them from designing the lives they want to live, having the careers that they want, so forth and so on. So essentially, that's kind of like my ethos. And in terms of the work that I do, I work with individuals through Pink Boxes Club, which you will see on my website. And then when I'm working with businesses and organizations, I do that through Voltage Vista. Essentially, it's the same thought process, but just different vehicles for different audiences.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Miss Maria, thank you. And today let's talk about the conversation you avoid are costing you more than you think. A compelling look that invites our listeners into your truth-telling approach. So tell us, for our listeners, can you paint a vivid picture? What does a real-world cost of a single avoided conversation look like? Not just in dollars, but in a lost morale, stifled innovation, and a personal resentment.
Gotcha. It's a few things. So if we're talking about at the workplace, it is not only resentment that comes up with individuals, but it's also this. I refer to it sometimes as malicious compliance at work. A lot of times, where when there's something that's coming up at work where you feel as if you can't speak up for whatever reason, it's not that we forget that we're experiencing that frustration. But when we feel as if we can't speak up, perhaps we know that we work in an organization where the leadership structure doesn't welcome feedback. Maybe we work in an organization where the culture and the politics make it unsafe to take risks or not be perfect. When we work in spaces like that, it's not that our opinions go away, it's not that our feelings go away. We just stuff them down and they tend to leak out over time, or you tend to withdraw. And it's kind of like little kids. And I don't mean to call people at work little kids, but it's kind of like when I'm in an environment and if I feel as if nothing about what matters to me is present in that environment, and whenever I want to add to that environment, that I am rejected somehow, at some point, because I'm a human being, I'm going to do one of a couple of things. On one hand, I'm just going to stop adding to that environment. I'm going to come here, I'm going to do exactly what I have to do until I find somewhere else to go. Or on the other hand, I'm going to pretend as if I am bought in and connected to what we're doing. I refer to that as malicious compliance. Let me give you an example about what I mean. I worked with a team a few years ago. It was actually a school, and the situation was really kind of sad and just very obvious if you were an outsider looking in. The principal at this school was someone who had been an educator for well over 30 years. On the other hand, he was working in a very politically dicey environment. And he had certain goals that he needed to achieve in order for him to be considered to be effective and successful at his job. I get that. Who doesn't understand that? But
Mm-hmm.
the problem was how he went about the work. It was, I am going to say that these are the directives. And if you don't agree with me, then I'm the boss. So what in terms of what it is that you think? And what I saw in that environment with that team was that the principal reached out to me because of the work that I do, because he found himself constantly giving directives. And he would think, I've told them what I expect, and then nothing would happen. I told them what I expect, nothing happens. And what he didn't see was that their silence wasn't agreement, but because they also knew it was the middle of the school year, that it was very difficult for any meaningful discipline to take place if multiple teachers were engaged in the same kind of quiet resistance. Essentially, what they were saying is, we're not going to do that. We think what he's asking us is inappropriate. We think it's obnoxious. We don't think it's going to work. But we're also not going to argue with him. And that's what happens in a lot of spaces where people feel as if they can't speak up. What might be perceived by some as passive aggressive is actually not passive at all. It's a type of aggression you just don't argue out loud, if you will. And if you want to change that to look at something similar in terms of people's personal lives, just the quiet resentment. You're doing things every single day, often time and time again, that you don't want to do, but for whatever reason you feel obligated. Maybe it's because it's your children, your spouse, your parents. But when you swallow what's important to you, it's kind of like, I don't know if this is going to sound gross, but if you've ever been sick and you're trying not to, I'm gonna say give it back. You're not trying to, do that. That bile you taste that's building up, that's what personal resentment is like for people. They can function sometimes, they will show up, but that just energy where it's, I don't want to do this. I feel forced to do this. I'm going to do it anyway. And at some point, just like when you get sick, at some point it erupts, perhaps even violently. It comes out. And so when you avoid those conversations, you might think you're keeping the peace, but what you're doing is setting yourself up for an explosion later. I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Explosion for sure. So let's go personal. What's the pivotal story from your own experience where avoiding a difficult conversation led to a tangible and perhaps surprising negative consequence? What did you learn about the true peace of silence?
There are two stories that I think of. Um, so, in terms of my personal story, one of my frustrations has been with, I didn't grow up with my mom. Let me say that first. I grew up with my grandparents. My mom was a young parent, she was a teen parent. And as a result of that, I grew up with my grandparents because their philosophy was, hey, she was 15 when she had a child and she was a child. So, with that, I grew up with them. I'm not saying that my mother was never around. I'm just saying I spent the majority of my time with my grandparents. Well, the challenge that I have, and frankly, I'm still working on this challenge with my mother because where I struggle, my mother is a very emotional person, very, very sensitive. And I tend to be a little bit more straightforward and I'm very clear about what it is that I need and what it is that I want from the people who are in my life. My mother feels very guilty because she wasn't in my life. She will spend probably the rest of her life apologizing to me for not being present. I understand that. Where she struggles is she thinks that I'm angry. She thinks that I hate her. She thinks all sorts of things because she beats herself up. And what that turns into for us, Daniel, is this: she tries to mother me in a way that I don't want to be mothered. And when I tell her, don't do that to me, don't do those kinds of things for me, this is what I need. What she will do, she will keep doing the thing that she wants to do because it gives her, in her mind, an opportunity to reclaim what she thought she could have been had she been ready to be a parent when I was born. And what that turns into for me is constant overstepping and controlling behavior. I'm like, I'm an adult. I don't hate you. And with all due respect, that time for us to have that little girl mommy relationship, that has passed. So, with that story in mind, so she, this is terrible. One day we were having a conversation and I asked her not to do something. And mind you, let me say this: I had been asking her for about a year not to do this thing. She wants us to get together and like take this major trip together. And I've made it clear I don't want to do that. And she called me on my birthday. It was a couple years ago. She called me on my birthday. I was having a great day. And she started with this same conversation again. And Daniel, I must admit, when I say
People, we want to apologize because Miss Mylena is being disconnected while we're waiting for her. I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in sixth season, abstract poetry in a third season, and of course my book 101 review in sixth season as well, comedy 101 in third season, and of course my food 101 in its sixth season as well. Geography 101 Love Letters, Movie 101 Review, Music 101 our fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its fourth season. Trivia 101, Law 101, Mental Health 101, Motivation 101, Entrepreneurship 101, and Bible Verses 101 are my baby podcasts. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So Miss Mylena is not here yet. So while waiting for her, let's listen to one of my audiobooks, people. Audiobooks, because my audiobooks are available on Audible or on Apple Podcasts. So I think Miss Mylena is here. Okay, Miss Mylena, let's continue our discussion. So we often rationalize avoidance as being nice or
Mhm.
diplomatic. How do you help leaders and individuals reframe not having the hard conversation as actually being a form of cowardice or neglect?
I don't necessarily like to frame it as cowardice. I think when you put it in those kinds of terms, I don't think people can actually hear you. They get lost in defending themselves. What I focus on is this: if you don't have that conversation, how much more time do you want to waste circling? Because avoiding the conversation doesn't fix the problem that you have when you recognize that the conversation needed to take place. For example, I'll give you a great example of an avoidance tactic that one of my clients was actually engaged in. Now, the silly part of me found it to be funny, but it was terrible from a leadership perspective. Has an employee who's chronically late. So when the Christmas holidays came up, everybody on the team, she gave them a gift, right? Well, for the employee who was late, she gave this employee a gift card for coffee. And the gift card said, for the coffee that you're always getting, that for getting the coffee that always makes you late, essentially. So rather than address the behavior, she chose a passive aggressive form of behavior that frankly embarrassed the employee in front of the coworkers because everybody's exchanging gifts. And
Yeah.
what happens when you don't deal with issues, you just create those kinds of outlets which don't fix the problem. So if the issue is something that needs to be dealt with, um, getting over whatever it is that's holding you back is the key. It could be something as simple as getting to work on time, or it could be something as simple as, hey, you're not pulling your weight in the house at home. Avoiding the conversation does not make the problem go away. All it does, it's like building resentment. It just makes you angry, or it makes you retaliate in other ways that I think sometimes we don't realize that we do. And then we see how we can wind up warring. So, you don't clean your part of the house. Well, I'm going to stop cleaning my part of the house. You won't wash dishes. So I'm only going to make enough dinner for me. That it starts to get into either these kinds of power struggles or this silent, bitter resentment, and neither of those approaches is actually effective, no matter what the actual issue is. The only time that I would actually recommend that someone avoid an uncomfortable conversation, because you might go, why would you ever avoid an uncomfortable conversation? If you don't encounter the person often, and if you know the issue is inconsequential. So if you are rude to me on the train, you might even push me, so to speak. Guess what? I will probably never see you again. I am not going to waste my energy screaming at you, having a discussion about, did you realize you pushed me? No, you know what? I'm not hurt. You're going to be off the train in 3 minutes. Let it go. But for
Yes.
situations where you're dealing with a person or a challenge for multiple iterations, don't let that go. That only hurts you. And here's the awkward thing: sometimes the other person may not realize how much the situation matters to you. If there's even a slight chance that the person is unaware, make sure you communicate that. And think about when you do communicate that, because you want to put yourself in a position where you're doing your best to resolve it. Think about how you are going to approach the person from the beginning so that you don't just tell them how upset you are or how bothered you are, but you want to make it comfortable and safe enough for them to actually hear you. It's one thing to say, you made me upset, this affected me, this bothered me. It's another thing to think about, how do I frame what I have to say so that Daniel understands where I'm coming from? And if Daniel can understand me without me putting him on the defensive, I have a much better shot at the behavior changing. Once you've done your part to advocate for yourself, then you have another set of decisions to make. Either I'm going to give this person more and more opportunities to frustrate me, or I'm going to give them enough opportunities to have some behavior change. It might take a little bit of transition, but ultimately, once you've made it clear what it is that the issue is, giving that the significance of the relationship in your life, then you make a decision from that point. How are you going to change your own behavior so that you experience less frustration? So let's say if I tell you, hey, I don't like the way you talk to me, and you keep talking to me that way. I've explained it maybe 2 or 3 times, and either you don't understand or you don't get it, or maybe you just don't care. And at that point, once I've done my part, then I make the set of decisions that only I can make. I'm going to spend less time with you, perhaps. I might choose other remedies, but ultimately, once I've made myself clear, then I can only do damage control if you choose not to respond to that. But I owe it to myself not to walk around with under a cloud of resentment by simply not talking about whatever the issue is. And then when you look to fix a problem, um, don't play games. Be very clear about what you're requesting.
Yes, don't play a game, people. So, beyond fear of
Yes.
conflict, what are some of the more subtle, sophisticated scripts we tell ourselves to avoid unnecessary talk?
They don't care. They're not going to change. Um,
Hmm.
so I'm just not even going to bring it up. Or I can't have the response that I want exactly the way that I want it. So I'm not going to deal with any of it. I'm just going to let it go. The other thing that I absolutely see people do to justify not talking about it, they do this thing I call building an army. They talk to everybody except the person they have an issue with. So now they feel better because everybody else is saying you're right and that person is wrong, but nobody is talking to that person. You're doing all of these things to avoid having the conversation to make yourself feel better about something that essentially is unpleasant. Yes, you've got to have that conversation, but making the excuses to avoid it does not help you. It simply does not help you. And depending on what the situation is, it could actually cost you. It could cost you time. It could cost you energy. It could cost you opportunities. I mean, I think about it this way: if you have long-standing resentment with somebody, and then you have that explosion, if you will, depending on the time, the place, who sees that, that's not your best moment, and you could actually be judged in that one instance of poor behavior for something that has been brewing for a long time. So, absolutely, those are the kinds of things people do to chicken out of the difficult conversation. I can't hear you.
Beyond the zooming in, what specific conversation do you find most commonly avoided in professional settings? And why does one carry so much weight?
I think the one of the things that comes up often at work is conversations where the power differential is different. So you have somebody who's in a leadership role with somebody who's not in a leadership role. That dynamic in and of itself makes it difficult for the person who has no formal authority or less authority to bring up challenges that they have, period. It doesn't even matter the topic. So, first and foremost, in terms of the workplace, that's one of the issues that come up when you have a difficult power dynamic. Then, the second thing that I find that happens often in organizations, when there needs to be a change in behavior, whether you're talking about people who have the same authority level or not, oftentimes when we start talking about organization change, we're going to have a new policy, we're going to do things differently. That change sometimes makes people uncomfortable. Perhaps they simply don't want to do whatever the new thing is. Perhaps they don't agree with the
Mm.
reason why it's not happening. But what happens is that resistance, that difficulty is not addressed head on, actually. And what that turns into is a power struggle that seems to be just a never ending tug of war on teams, because we aren't talking about the fact that, Mylena is engaging in behavior that undermines what we're supposed to be doing as a team. But I will say this in terms of uncomfortable conversations, the one thing that I hate more than anything personally, with some of my clients, I help them with human resources challenges, issues. You wouldn't guess, and maybe you would, the one conversation that is not the hardest to have in terms of compliance, but it makes me feel so uncomfortable to bring it up. I hate issues around body odor and dress code. Those seem very simple, but body odor and dress code issues, oh my God, if I could pay somebody to have those conversations for me, I would. Because to me, it feels like it's personally humiliating. Um, and I've come up with a strategy that helps me to have that conversation. Long story short, what I do, if it's a
Mhm.
body odor issue, I'm just very, matter of fact, I do the same thing to some extent with dress code conversations. I'm very clear. This is the issue. Um, your colleagues have complained about a body odor, your customers. I just lay out the issue with whatever it is. Once I lay it off, I said, look, um, unless there is, if there's a situation perhaps that you need to let me know about, because there might be rights that you have. Let's say maybe the Americans with Disabilities Act, depending on what's going on, let me know that. We can work that out. But I need you to resolve that issue. And what I will offer is, why don't you take the rest of the day off and let me know if you need any help? But with that being said, I expect the issue to be resolved, and I will give them maybe 24 hours, 48 hours. The reason I offer to let them go home is because can you imagine how you would feel if you're having a conversation with somebody and they just told you you smell bad, or maybe your clothes smell bad? You wouldn't have any sort of feelings about that conversation. So I want to give you space to go home, to collect yourself, and then if you have something that you want to say in response to that, making sure you know that the door is open. But those are my two personal ones that I hate: body odor and dress code, because they just seem like such a personal thing for people. But if it's a problem, it's a problem.
Indeed, about the order, Miss Marlena. So tell us, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
That's actually my short-term personal goal. Actually, I want to lose weight. So that's just my short-term personal goal. And so what I'm working on is changing my work schedule in such a way where I go work out first thing in the morning. I've learned that my best commitment to myself when it comes to health is to do those kinds of things first thing in the morning. If I tell you I'm going to work out in the afternoon, I am lying to you. I am not going to do it. So, in general, working on that in terms of a short term goal. Long term goal, believe it or not, what I'm trying to position myself for right now, I want to develop the expertise to be a historian in terms of conflict. And I would like to travel the world looking at historical conflict and how to analyze that through a leadership lens.
Well, good luck to your goals, Ms. Marlena, and looking forward for more success. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey, Miss
There are
Marlena?
a couple of books actually that I love. One is called Smart. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So one of the books is called Smart Trust. I absolutely love Smart Trust. And the reason being is that the book focuses on helping people figure out how to communicate when they believe the situation is difficult or sensitive. So Smart Trust is probably one of my absolute favorite books to read. And then on the other hand, in terms of just looking at someone's life in terms of building compassion, the book that I read recently is Richard Pryor's autobiography. Um, it was perhaps one of the most provocative books I've ever seen in terms of helping you to see how a person, whether they are in a professional setting or in a personal setting, you can't really turn off your personal life. You can try to manage it when you're in public, so to speak, or in front of your colleagues, but who you are is really who you are. So with Richard Pryor's book, his life in many ways was just a really sad story. And to me, it just kind of proved one of the things that I often say, and that's all leadership is personal, because I think we take all of our stuff with us, even if we're at work and in professional settings. And the Richard Pryor story is just phenomenal, very painful. He worked out all of his problems on stage in front of the world. When I say all of them, I mean everything from womanizing to addiction to all sorts of stuff. So if I had to recommend two right now, Smart Trust and the Richard Pryor memoir.
Thank you for that recommended books, Miss Mylena. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And to wrap up our discussion for today, to bring it home with your trademark directness, what is one specific avoided conversation that you suspect a lot of our listeners are carrying right now? What is the first sentence you challenge them to say this week to start changing the cost in an investment?
Conversation that most people are not having right now that they need to have. Think about the people in your life who rely on you a lot, who you love a lot, and think about how often they ask you to do things that are things that you believe they can do for themselves, but you say yes because you feel obligated. Thinking about how do you begin the conversation where you not only say no, but you say no in such a way that gives them some of the work of their lives back, while also allowing you to hang on to some of your energy, some of your resources for your own benefit. So if you find yourself in a space where you're doing something for someone on a regular basis and you resent that, find a way to have that conversation and give them the work of their lives back.
Yes, beautiful, beautiful statement, Miss Mylena. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So can you please invite our listeners to support your business, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
I didn't hear the last part. The applause overshadowed it. I didn't hear you.
Can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your business, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Absolutely. If you go to my website, mylenasutton.com, there is a contact page. Feel free to reach out. As a matter of fact, there is also on that page a list of free resources. Um, and there's one giveaway that I have going right now called Text Pals. If you sign up for that one, I will send you a text message once a week asking you how are you making out on your personal goals. Completely free. The objective is to make sure you keep your word to yourself.
Interesting. People, let's support Miss Mylena Sutton because if you support her, for sure, more and more empowering directness will rise. So, Miss Mylena, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Welcome, people. See you soon.